my name is Phillippe Talavera. I'm the director of a local NGO in Namibia, which is called Ombetja Yehinga Organisation, better known as OYO. And the idea behind OYO is to use various art forms to talk about social issues with young people. So to try to engage young people using arts, whether it is for research purposes or for behavior change project purposes. That's the idea behind the organization. I think there's two legs to that answer. One is because often we perceive the woman as the survivor and the man or the boy as the problem, the perpetrator. But obviously, both are involved in GBV. So if you address only one of the two gender, somehow you're missing out on the other one. But also, I think in many movements in the world, it does not work if you involve only one segment of society. Take, for example, the LGBTQI+ community. They needed an ally. They needed people who were not part of the community, but allied to the cause to make changes. And it's going to be the same with GBV. We need allied to a survivor of GBV, whether they are boys, men, girls, or women, to be part of movement to try to change the narrative. In Namibia, we had a study in sort of three sections. The first one was to discuss with other NGOs, CSO that are working in the field to find out what are they doing and how are they doing it. Then we interviewed some of the beneficiaries of those projects. What was their experiences with those different approaches? And finally, we had a workshop with young people where we sort of critically analyze what is being done, where it is being done, what are the various impacts on the beneficiaries, and what they feel might be gaps or duplications or points that we are all missing when we put all those things together. And for me, the most interesting part was obviously the workshop with the youth, because it was really interesting to dissect the results with young people to see what is being done, how it is being done, and why it is being done with young people, and to get their perspective. And their perspective really sort of changed some of even our approach now at OYO. One of the strong comments that was made by the youth is that the current campaign tend to maybe victimize women and box the men in the role of perpetrators. And it does not really allow men to become ally, for example, because all the imagery around GBV shows the woman as a victim and the man as a perpetrator. So it does not really encourage men to get involved in the discourse. Another interesting finding was from another of the youth participants that what I call violence, someone else can call it tradition. So we don't all understand violence the same way. And there might be a little bit of a need to redefine what is violence and what violence means to different people who have different cultural background. So that was really two of the most interesting findings, I think, from the survey that we had. I think one of the main things would be to stop treating men as the abuser, but start engaging them as ally to the cause. There is this idea, and working on this idea, that not all men are bad, not all men are perpetrators, not all men are violent, and encouraging men to reflect on what does it mean to be a man in their own context. What masculinity has got very different meaning from very different people based on our culture, tradition, religion. So working a little bit more on the concept of positive masculinity together with men and engage men as allied to the movement, not as outsiders, not as something that is happening somewhere else to someone else, but get them involved in the movement. even if they themselves are not perpetrators, even if they themselves are not victim or survivors, to involve them in the discourse. We are starting a project now with young people in two regions in the north of Namibia. And for example, we asked the young people, they are teenagers between the age of 14 and 19, 20. We asked teenagers to go back to their community and to take photos of positive male role model. So what is it that they call a positive male role model, and what photos would they like to see in terms of positive masculinity? And they came back with fantastic photos of someone helping an older person, someone carrying a baby on his back, which is traditionally a woman's role, someone cooking, someone washing the dishes, someone helping at home. So we got this fantastic collection of photos, and it was very interesting to see um, how do we engage young people to look at the softer side of masculinity, to look at the other side that is often not publicized in newspaper, in by the journalist. I mean, it's not a side that is interesting, that is sensational, but to look at this other side of all the good things that men do in society. And so that's one of the projects and one of the approach we are trying with young people, to give a graphic representation to side of masculinities we are maybe not used to see, at least not in the public sphere. Well, I've learned a lot of things, but I mean, one of the key learning step, I think, which is an obvious one, is that we need to engage the youth, and we need to engage boys and men in the discourse, not as part of a project, but already in the early stage of preparing, like what we did now with this research. So right from the beginning, involve young people in the discourse, because they have brilliant ideas that you might not be thinking about. So that's important to really engage right from the beginning, right at the inception of project, men and boys, and find out what they are interested in and how they would like to develop a project with you, and not just impose onto them a project that has already been designed. And as much as it sounds obvious, I think it's an important thing to remember, that we should be as participatory as possible, and that start at the beginning of the design of any project. Another thing that I've really learned is that they don't like to be portrayed as perpetrators. And some of them don't relate to that image because they are not perpetrators themselves. So they don't really see where do they fit into this GBV discourse, because they don't feel concerned. They are not perpetrators, they are not victims or survivors. So is to change the narrative, change the imagery around GBV, and show that it is something that everybody can get involved in a positive way. It's not just for the survivors, or it's not just for the abusers. It's a societal phenomenon, and everybody in society can actually play a part. It was good to really focus on the research. I think oftentimes, especially when we design projects, we tend to jump a little bit the research stage, and it's wrong. And to really, I think what Align gave us was this time to really focus and take the time to do it properly. As I said, in our case, we did it in stages. We had enough time to do it in those stages, and we had enough time to really look into it in a participatory way with people who wanted to involved. And that was brilliant, I think. We should sometimes spend a bit more time doing those work. Of course, it is not an intervention as such, but it's laying the foundation for further interventions. And that is really, really important. And in a country like Namibia, where we have a small population, but we have a lot of different cultural groups, it's very important to go back to the drawing board on a regular basis, and to see how can we involve those different ethnic groups, and how can we start working from their perspective, not necessarily from our perspectives. And of course, we have a right-based approach, but if we try to impose an idea onto a given culture, it's unlikely that it will work. Rather, we should start from the perspective of that culture and see how we can, together with the community, shift some of those elements and bring them to realize that the shifts is beneficial for them, not imposed onto them.